Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Elkins, pro staff shooter with Expedition Archery, and I'm filming the second episode of what I like to call Local Legends. Once again, with my uncle, Mark Elkins. I think if anybody watched the first episode, I covered a lot of Mark's history. This is another wonderful example of a local giant that Mark has harvested over his 40 years of avid deer hunting and 20 plus trophies that he's taken over the years. We're going to start with this deer. Now, this deer was killed prior to the one that we just did in episode one.
The last deer was harvested in 2023. This deer was harvested in 2022.
2022. And
within a year of one another.
What state was this deer harvested in?
This deer was harvested in Ohio, southern Ohio.
A lot of people probably aren't going to realize that we live
right on the river.
Right on the river. We can be in Ohio in 15 minutes. It's a good advantage for somebody that likes to hunt multiple states. But estimated age of this deer?
Between 7.5 and 8.5 years old.
And score of this deer?
181.
181. Now, one thing that I will mention, and a lot of people aren't going to be able to see it very well on the camera, but one of the things that stands out about this deer is not his antlers, it's his neck. What was the circumference of this deer's neck?
He was a special form, poured form, and he had like a 29-inch neck. I don't know the brisket size around him, but the deer's just absolutely huge. Everybody walks in my house, that's the first thing they notice. They're like, oh my goodness, that thing's huge. And they're not talking about the antlers. The antlers are good, but are great, but the deer itself, you compare him to other deer, and he's just really
looks like you put a set of antlers on a heifer.
It looks like a small cow.
Yeah,
he's really big. More in the mule deer form than the whitetail form.
Now, I'm not, once again, not looking for pinpoints, coordinates, but you've hunted a particular area in Ohio for, a decade that I know of.
Yeah, about 18 to 20 years. I've hunted generally two farms and the same area. Yeah.
Now, was this deer one that had been on your radar prior to the year you killed him, harvested him?
I've had at least 3 to 4 years of trail camera pictures. Noticeably, 3 years I had trail camera pictures of this deer, and I'd watched him. I actually had some really close encounters with him early on.
Same season?
In 21. And then in 22, I did have an encounter with him that I missed him, a near miss. And well, it wasn't a near miss. It was I missed him by 20 yards or something. But I didn't scare him too bad because he came back.
Yeah, he was, that's similar to what we were talking about there a minute ago. Now, with this particular deer, was there a specific process or a list of steps you had to take in the harvest of this particular animal?
This deer, it's kind of a funny story, but the farmer, we've become friends over the years, and we're still friends, and he's an older gentleman, and he told me this. He said, that big buck you're after, he said, he really likes apples. He said, he comes up here and he stands in my backyard and eats the apples. And he said, I come out the other morning, he's standing underneath the apple tree. And so we bagged up some apples, and I took him down where I hunt at, and he was right. He really liked apples, and he would come in and he would eat the apples pretty routinely. I mean, I had pictures of him, almost 3 or 4 times a week eating apples.
Now, this was a later season harvest, wasn't
it? This was a crossbow harvest, and I took him in November, I think around late November. I don't remember the exact date. I could look and see, but
I'm gonna go ahead and cover this before anybody jumps in the comment section. You don't only use a crossbow; you also use a compound bow.
Oh yeah.
But how many shoulder surgeries have you had?
I've had 2. I'm probably going to have a third one.
I just wanted to go ahead and cover that before somebody decided to run their chops about it.
Yeah, I've had both my shoulders. I've had to have reconstructed, and I'm probably gonna my left one. I'm probably gonna do that again, and it's kind of work related. It's almost like carpal tunnel. I use that arm so much at work,
Yeah.
and I'm an operator, so uh, and so, but yeah, I try to use a bow when I can, and most of the time I do.
Now, with this animal, was there a special stand setup, location, directional, anything that you had to do whenever this hunt occurred?
There was. I had a ladder stand at the edge of a food plot that I'd built, and I'd hunted it, but my wind would shift every night. The last hour, it was like it almost like clockwork. It would change, and it would blow right down the edge of the wood line. And so I didn't have a lot. I had a where the deer all came from in the bedding area, and they came to this food plot, and I'd get a lot of does in it, and on the edge of it, I had some apples set out and a mineral lick, and I had a little 3 acre field, and it was probably 60 yards across it, and then a creek, just a narrow wood patch and then it goes from the creek into a bean field. So I was trying to catch these deer as they transitioned out of the bedding area through this food plot, and they just kind of slowly worked their way. They were going to the bean field, even though it had just been cut. And a few weeks before, they still went to that bean field pretty routinely. And so I moved a ground blind. I put a ground blind and brushed it in pretty good on the edge of between the creek and that little patch of woods, or is a long actually run of woods that just brushed that was by the creek. And so I made that change because I couldn't ever get my wind, and deer would blow. They'd come to the edge of the field and they'd blow. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do this.
It's the most heart wrenching sound
Yeah,
there is.
it screams failure. I failed somewhere, and so every time a deer blew at me, I knew I failed somewhere. So I moved across the food plot to the other side, and there was no trees that were accessible to get in to be able to hide well enough. So I said, well, I just put a ground blind up. I put a ground blind up, and it worked very well. Deer would come out, and they were very relaxed, and they'd work inside the food plot, and it did kind of help ground my scent there. And so they would walk very close to me and go to the bean field. The only thing I found challenging is I had to change where I departed the field at, to leave in the evenings without running everything out. So
Now, not trying to focus on any other deer that you've taken over the years, but I mean, of the 20 plus trophies that you've harvested, how many have been out of a ground blind?
two.
I was gonna say that's odd for you. I mean, you normally always were stands, up in
Tree
the air.
tree stand, typically a summit climber or a ladder stand. I do have some lock-ons. I've used a Millennium lock-on. I've used a few others, uh, lock-on stands, and
But a
I
ground
love them.
blind,
But I love them because you can really sneak in and climb in quietly. You don't make a lot of noise, and I like that feature. But and hunting the ground blind on the edge of that food plot, uh, I liked it.
I've hunted with you dozens of times. The only time that we ever hunted out of a ground blind was turkey season.
And I hunted with your son, out of a ground blind here on this farm, and he, we've seen deer out of it, and they're great.
He walked one, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He regretted it. He
He did.
actually,
He didn't regret it a few months later.
no,
But
he did at the moment, but yeah, it's I've grown to like hunting. The older I get, I think the more I like hunting out of a ground blind because of their comfort. You can get very comfortable in them. You don't. I like the visibility of the tree stand. I can see out further.
yes,
Certainly in the fall, but now in the early fall when the leaves are still on, sometimes you're
hurting
advantage on
yourself.
the ground. You get up in the tree, you lose visibility.
Yeah. So as far as this deer goes, the day that this harvest took place, tell me that story.
Uh, well, I'd actually missed this deer about 8 days before. I'd taken a buck in Kentucky, and because I'll hunt at kind of advantage, I hunt so much that I hunt with whatever's. And I'd like to hunt with a bow, but I'd harvested a buck in Kentucky with a rifle, and he was my number one Kentucky buck. And so I moved to Ohio. And I harvested him opening day on Saturday, and then I moved over to Ohio, and I started hunting this buck. And on, I think Monday, I harvested this buck on Saturday, and I seen him on Monday, and I missed him because I put my crossbow boat, excuse me, in crooked. I put the wrong fletching down. I was in the ground blind. It was low light. My eyes are bad. I didn't have my readers with me, and I just kind of feeling my way. And I put my bolt in, leaned my crossbow up, and you know, I was sitting there, and I'd seen a couple of small does or something, and it was probably another 45 minutes before dark, and you know, when I missed him, I got down. I told you earlier, I got down. I was praying in my ground blind. I cleared everything out of the way and got down and done some praying, not for big bucks. I don't pray for big bucks or stuff like that. I pray for the things that are important to me, my family and my salvation, and you know, just that uh, I want to put my time in serving God. And so I got up and blew my grunt call, and here he come. I put my seat back, grunted, and he come running out 20 yards, clean miss. The crossbow bolt goes 25 yards behind him up into the field, and he stands there, and I start trying to reload, and I come home, and when I got home, my wife, she said, well, did you get the big one? And I said, no, I missed the biggest buck of my life this evening. I said, she said, you did not. And I said, I did. I said, a little disappointing, but I said, he was a monster, just an absolute stud of a deer. And before I'd checked my trail camera on the way home, and within 15 minutes of me missing him, or 15 minutes after dark, probably 45 minutes after I missed him, he's right back there in front of my trail camera. And
apples.
He loves apples. He was an apple. He had an apple addiction. So he was right there. And then I thought, well, I didn't scare him too bad. You know, he came right back in, and so I started hunting again. I didn't give him no days. A friend of mine, Mike, he said, Waste, you will give him a few days to rest. I said, no, I'm going right after him tomorrow. He wasn't horribly concerned. So I started hunting every evening, and I was hunting, I think 7 or 8 days later from that. And I look up, he's just standing in front of me at 40 yards.
Same blind, same field.
Same blind, same place. Nothing changed. He had come into the grunt call, so he'd come in off my right. And when he came in right in front of me at 45 yards. And I kind of pulled the blind down, and he looked, and I waited till he calmed back down. When he calmed down, I took the shot, and just perfect. And he ran about 80 yards and just stood there, and like he laid down. And I walked over, and the pictures are just really phenomenal. This animal.
And without a doubt, the pictures that were put on Facebook when this buck was BBD'd on Facebook, these were probably the best infield pictures. Because honestly, when you saw this deer on Facebook, you thought, "Oh, it's just good pictures. They ain't no way that deer's that big." You know,
even the taxidermist commented. He said he had mounted over 850. Is the biggest he had ever mounted.
Yeah, body and everything. I mean,
big, not the antlers. He's mounted some 250s, but he said he never mounted the form. He never had to buy a form that big. And
Revolution form.
I think he said it was Revolution who he used, and he had the special putty the face to get it big enough to hold the hide. He said the skin was just so big.
Now, did the day that this deer was harvested, did weather play a big factor into your decisions, or?
No, it didn't. A lot of things don't impact me. Certainly, if I'm hunting out of a ground blind, I'll hunt just about anything out of a ground blind. I don't like to hunt in the rain because I don't like to be wet. And I have hunted in light rain, but if it's downpour rain, you're just miserable. I mean,
count me out.
You still stand a chance. And I hunt, like I said earlier, I hunt over 100 days every year. Whitetail. I'll whitetail hunt more than 100 days, or at least 100 opportunities in the tree stand, whether they be morning and evening, or I'm not an all day hunter.
100 hunts.
Yeah, 100 times I've gone in and out of the tree stand, and I'm not the kind of guy that goes and climbs in at daylight and hunts till dark. I'm not built that way, and so I know that big bucks are killed during that time of midday, and I will hunt late and then go back in early, but I always take a break.
A good friend of ours, I know, good friend of ours, Tyler Hensley, killed a heck of a good deer this year. Right, I think it was 12:35 p.m. or something. You know, I have. I don't think I've ever been. I don't think I've ever been in a tree stand at that time of day.
I've hunted till noon, but I'm not hunting afternoon. I usually come out and have lunch, and you can't get this body, hanging in a tree. Maybe if you had Christmas cakes or little Debbie's or something,
No,
but
no meals skipped.
yeah, no meals missed for this guy. And so I got a friend Brandon who comes from Pennsylvania, and he pulls down, stays at my barn. He camps and he saddle hunts, and he'll climb in and he'll hunt daylight to dark. And I'm like, hey, you're an animal.
Good
I
for
can't
you.
do it. He's had some very good fortune, but he sits there all day, and then the deer comes in 30 minutes before
For
dark
dark.
anyway.
Yeah, no, these. Well, it's now my brother-in-law, but he'll hike in these public land hunts, and man, he hikes. He hikes in miles, and he'll get in there, before daylight, and he might get down and move trees,
Right.
but he is in the woods with only the nourishment that he packed in his backpack. I like getting out of the tree and going to Mexican.
I do too, but I do that in Colorado when I'm elk hunting, but I don't do that. I don't do that here when I'm hunting in Kentucky or Ohio. I usually go find me a little snack somewhere and they go get back in.
Get my feet warm, and
probably smell like Giovanni's pizza by the time I get back. But I get out and go, and then but he was an amazing deer when I took him. I called my boy and I told
that's
him.
what I was getting ready to ask you. Who was the first person you called when you shot this deer?
Well, he and I had lunch together, and he was in from work, and he was going to hunt Kentucky. I was tagged out, and I was going to Ohio, and I was kidding with him that we were having Mexican, and I said, you got you got any good gloves? And he goes, yeah, I got some good gloves. He said, what for? I said, because you're going to be dragging a big old buck tonight. And we're just kidding around with him, and so I called him. He was walking out of the woods. I said, you got them gloves ready? And he kind of, yeah. He said, you did not. And I said, I took him. I took the big drop time buck, and so
Now, I know it's different state, but how fast did the news spread locally on this deer?
pretty quick. I called my buddy Greg from Florida. He was back in Florida. I called Mike and some others, and I put on Facebook, and so several people. A neighbor of mine, John Reed, was over here. Him and his wife come to look at this deer, and he's a 180-inch deer. That's that's a lot of deer.
Yeah.
I know people kill 200-inch deer. There's a guy in Ohio that's killed last 3 years. He's killed 200-inch deer. He's blessed with a good spot to hunt, and he's made good decisions to get to that point. But I've been running around the woods 42 years, and I've seen a 200-inch deer, but it was on a train going to work. I'm an engineer, so I get to run through a lot of agriculture land. I've seen some in Ohio, but
it's not like they're hanging out around every corner. It's not,
not everybody's getting them. They're just not taking them, and I haven't been blessed yet with a place to pick up a 200-inch deer. But if I seen one on my camera, it'd be the only guy I went after. It'd be it.
Well, collectively, between the garage and the house, you've probably got a couple thousand inches of deer heads hanging up.
I do, and between in less than 1 year, and this buck was featured secondary to the buck we done earlier in Buckmasters. I took 3 bucks, and they totaled 517 or 18 inches of antlers in less than 1 year.
Yeah, it's less than 12 months.
Yeah, they said that's pretty remarkable that you take. The 8-point was 158 and 3/8. This was 181.
And a lot of people are going to hear 150 inches and think that's not very big. An 8-pointer
almost made 160.
Yeah, an 8-pointer that's creeping up on 160 inches is an absolute giant of an 8-pointer.
That's a big 8-point.
Yeah.
He was a big 8, and I actually walked the deer that we done earlier. I walked him twice with a bow so I could take the 8-point. And I hunted the 8-point. And actually, Greg, my friend from Florida, missed him with a bow out of my stand. I let him hunt my stand, and he
That's a
missed
good
him.
friend.
Oh yeah, I fished with him, and he hunts with me.
Yeah.
But he missed him. It was a little depressing, but I took him, and later on after he went back to Florida.
So to recap on this animal, what do you think? What do you think was the key to harvesting this deer?
Dedication, just staying after it. I I knew he was there, and I knew he was not given a lot of daylight showing, but he had been there a couple of times early in the morning, like he was going back. I knew he bedded close because he was going back to his bedding area, and some neighbors had videos and pictures of him, and so just dedication, staying after
How
it.
many people would? I mean, really, how many people would have been so discouraged after missing him that they would have hung it up for the year? I mean, that's
A lot. I
yeah.
was discouraged. I got frustrated with myself that I'd put that bolt in wrong because I could have ended it all, 3 days apart, and but just got to keep going. I mean, uh, he wasn't. I knew I didn't scare him really bad, so he knew something was amiss, but he didn't know what. And you get a deer this age, he's kind of a wily rascal. He knows that he's on his toes.
Well, a deer growing to be 7 or 8 years old, regardless, rut or no rut, they're very intelligent.
They are.
They know they know that farm better than any of us could ever even hope to learn that farm. Now, the next question I have, and I'm going to bet you I can answer it for you, is what would you have done differently? And I'm sure you're going to say load the bolt the right way the first time.
I would have done that the first time, but I don't know that you know he he was. I don't know that I could have done anything any differently other than load the boat different and make sure that that was done right, and probably open the back door of the blind and make sure I had plenty of light in the blind, because I try to keep it dim, as dark in the blind as I can, because I don't want them to see me move, and I don't want a lot of light. So I just keep a very small opening in the top of it for my eye level.
Now, I know this deer was harvested prior to the one that we just did, but when you harvested this deer, did you already have another deer in mind lined up for the following season?
Always. I never. I I keep records of every deer. Like if even a 4-point, I save a picture of him, so I know what he did from year to year. It's just what I do. I like to know how they develop, how they grow. I had pictures of this deer. I had videos of him doing scrapes right there by my where my ground blind is, working the edge of the food plot. I had a lot of uh, history with this deer. I'd seen him a lot from because it's a big farm. You get to see him way off, and so and I knew that there were several people pursuing him.
Well, I told you this, but I mean, obviously nobody on the internet's gonna know about it. Uh, I know where the farm is where you hunt this deer. Now, you couldn't get that information out of me with waterboarding, but I'm not going to share that. But anyways, I own a towing business, and I did a winch out for a truck that was stuck out just a mile or two away from where this deer was harvested. And I pulled, this was right before deer season coming in Ohio, and I pulled the guy's truck out, and we were just talking. He had some big fancy, sticker on his back glass, and he was a guide, and he was with some big outfitter. And that's what I asked him. I said, "Man, what are you doing here?" He said, "There is some big deer around through here." And I was like, "No kidding." I said, "I've heard that." He told me, he said, "There was a stud 180s killed over here a couple years ago." He said, "Kind of late season." I was like, big joker, big red bearded rascal. He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Look a little bit like me?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't know him. I don't know." But with this, I understand that the last question that I asked last time has to be a little different from the last question this time. But in the hunting community as a whole, what would you like to see change? Doesn't have to be deer. Doesn't have to be. I mean, whitetail's generally the topic we discuss.
Right. I think I'd like to see the elimination of high fence deer hunting. I think it's
Nationwide.
nationwide. I think it's not fair chase. It's you know, a bunch of rich people that want to go out and pat themselves on the back for harvesting an animal because they got a big checkbook. Uh, I think you run too much risk of the spreading of disease, and we're starting to see that more and more across the Commonwealth of Kentucky and a lot of states. We're dealing with the disease that's coming from deer that are pen fed, you know, that are eating out of a trough, and
Drinking out of a trough, stagnant
yeah,
water.
and so what it does is that deer gets a disease, and then somebody doesn't take care of their fence, and that deer gets out, and it infects, you know, hundreds. It infects the bread and butter of no matter how you slice this, every state that has whitetail deer, they make their money off whitetail deer. On the
The
eastern,
Kentucky, the Department of Fish and Wildlife
oh,
does. Yeah,
they foot the bill off deer hunters. That's their number one sales point. And if we end up allowing them to kill every deer that we have because they mismanaged the disease, the spread of disease, so that some clown could make a $500,000 selling high fence hunts over deer that were pen raised, and they let them in with a bottle and said, "Here, shoot this one," and some guy, you know, got to shoot a big deer. I mean, have some pride. I think, you know, get out and work for it.
well,
I
and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you kept a tab, which I'm sure you do, and I don't want to know that answer, but from January 1st to December 31st, for the time, fuel, corn, for the equipment, for every dollar you spent, it'd probably be cheaper if you just went one day or 1 week a year and went on a high fence hunt.
I spend thousands of dollars year round. I mean, it's not you know, that I go out on no the second Saturday in November and pick up my. I did. There was a time I did that, but now over the past 20 years, it's an obsession for me. And when I say it's an obsession, it's year round. I spend time in but it's because I love the woods. I love being out in God's creation, and I love seeing the animals, and so. But yeah,
I remember being a little kid and me and you turkey hunting together,
mm-hmm,
and we'd walk through the woods, and you were pointing out scrapes and rubs from last year, and
yep,
these shelves that these bucks are going to travel. And I remember thinking, I was like, it's April,
yeah.
it's turkey season, you
Uh,
know.
Trust me, I was duck hunting with my other nephew John, one of my other nephews, and we were talking about something. I said that'd be a great place right over there to take a big old buck. I said, there's a monster. I said, there's a monster living there, and we bumped into guys. Yes, they killed a John, or they took a John over there, and he showed me a video of or a picture of it, and I said, well, that is a big one. I said, and John said, well, you called that one? I said, yeah. I said, I knew that place would produce, and so it's a yeah, I think it's frustrating, and it should be frustrating for the outdoor community that there's so much high fence now and so much, you know,
It's so predominant nowadays. It used to be very few and far between.
it's pay to play.
Yeah.
They've consumed up all the land. They've consumed up all the and they build a fence around it and turn pets loose so people can go in and shoot them. That, you know, no shame, I guess, you know, in their game, and so
Well, it feels like nowadays, not so much around here. I feel like maybe our particular area of Appalachia has not grown with the times like everybody else has, but it seems like when I lived in Western Kentucky, there was two types of people. There was either the people that were from extreme wealth and owned all the property, or there was the guys fist fighting on public land. The average Joe couldn't hunt because he couldn't afford it. He couldn't kill big deer. He couldn't afford to.
well, first of all, most of these people that are big landowners, primarily they inherited it.
Yes,
Nobody's buying agricultural land anymore. It's too expensive unless you're
yes.
already a farmer. You know, the guy that doesn't have any. I'm not making fun of them because I own a decent amount of land,
I was getting ready to tell you, you farm.
and I do farm, and I have cattle, and I farm hay and stuff like that. But you know, and I started off, I bought it, and but I don't have 10,000 acres like
No.
some of these guys do, and most of them inherited a lot of that, and certainly you get up in the big buck country in Ohio, those guys, they inherited those farms, and West Kentucky same way.
Yeah, I didn't when I moved out there at 18. I didn't know what to think because you'd pull up and it was a crop farm to the horizon,
Yeah,
and then my friends would tell me, they'd say, "Oh, well, that's so and so's farm, and he owns 6,000 acres," and I'm like, "What?
he
thousand?
inherited six. He
Thousand?"
inherited 6,000 acres.
I'm like, "1,000? Like, how do you even manage that?" Because
Yeah,
around here, if somebody tells you they own 600 acres, you're like, BS. Like, no, you don't.
it, you know, and they lease their land. I'm good with the leasing. You know, I'm not. I just think it's not fair, Chase, to put a deer in a fence and let somebody shoot it. And
Yeah, I get.
not fair to the animal. It's not fair. I mean, I guess it's similar to you know, butchering cattle or hogs or something, but these people aren't done it for that
There's
reason.
not a sport involved with
That's right.
cattle and hogs, and I get stuck in the debate a lot of times with people that want to talk about corn being a complete unfair advantage, and cameras being a complete unfair advantage and everything else. But my opinion falls in line with yours in the fact that you know I would much rather see somebody that goes and manages a piece of property and puts nourishment out for the animals and keeps track of them and helps them create a healthy lifestyle, as opposed to the guy that gets on an airplane and flies to some big ranch once a year and walks through the gate and goes out there and harvests a 200-inch deer that was pin fed. But that's just my opinion.
They're doing it for elk and
Oh,
everything
yeah.
else now. I mean, it's the guy that's got the most money can go stand there and somebody holds his hand, points it out to him.
Yeah, that one, not that one,
Yeah,
that one.
and make sure to take that one on the left. You know,
Yeah,
and that's so
that's
they're
the one you
just
bought.
yeah, that's what you paid for, and uh, so I'd like to see that end. If I seen one thing that I thought should change in the out that is regulated by the Fish and Wildlife in most states, and that'd be it. The high fence deer.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you 100%. Well, this deer is definitely, and I know that I've told you this on many occasions, this deer is, of all the deer you've ever harvested, this one's probably my favorite, just because he's unreal looking. He's he was one of the first deer that I can remember being killed that's like made time stand still. You know, I think that this deer is a once in a lifetime animal. I know a lot of people are probably more fond of the one you recently harvested, but this one's without a doubt my favorite. Um, if anyone that's watched this video has any questions, comments for me or for Mark, either one, like I say, we're related, so we talk pretty frequently. It's wouldn't be hard to get a hold of him. Uh, Feel free to drop a comment, send me a message, whatever. I appreciate anybody that's came along for the ride and listened to the story, because that's, for me, that's what it's all about. It's got far less to do with the size of the antlers and far more to do with the story, because it's what keeps this, I'll call it a habit, not a hobby, but it's what keeps this habit alive for me is the stories. I remember being a kid sitting in this garage on an old couch stuffed right over in that corner, and I used to like coming deer hunting, not to go deer hunting, to get out of the woods at 11 and come back here and sit around and chew the fat and hear the stories of what everybody harvested or seen, or old stories throughout the years. So that's what's always done it for me. But thanks for watching. Leave me a comment if you want to, and y'all have a good day.